How do we measure the area of a shape that has no simple formula? How do we find the total distance traveled when speed is constantly changing? Or the amount of water that passes through a pipe when the flow rate rises and falls? At first, these seem like three completely different problems, but each one is built from the same hidden idea. Take many tiny contributions and add them together. That idea is integration. Let us begin with the most familiar interpretation of an integral: area. Suppose we have a function, and we want the area between its graph and the horizontal axis from A to B. For a rectangle, the calculation is easy: width times height. Triangles and circles also have familiar formulas. But this boundary is curved. Its height changes continuously, and no single standard shape fits it exactly. So instead of trying to measure the entire region at once, we will break it into pieces that we already know how to measure. Divide the interval from A to B into 4 equal parts. Above each part, construct a rectangle. Its width is the length of the small interval, and its height is taken from the value of the function. The area of one rectangle is therefore width times height. Adding the 4 rectangles gives an approximation of the total area. But it is clearly not perfect. Some rectangles remain below the curve and miss part of the region. Others extend above it and include too much. The approximation depends on how wide the rectangles are. Now divide the interval into more pieces. With 8 rectangles, the gaps become smaller. With 16, the rectangles follow the curve more closely. With 32, the error becomes difficult to see. But even 100 rectangles still give only a finite approximation. The real idea is not to choose one extremely large number of rectangles. It is to imagine a limiting process. The number of rectangles approaches infinity, while the width of each rectangle approaches 0. Each individual contribution becomes tiny, but all of them are still added together. In this limit, the Riemann sum becomes an exact integral. The approximate collection of rectangles is replaced by the exact signed area beneath the curve. Every part of the integral notation describes this construction. The integral symbol is an elongated letter S, reminding us that integration is a form of summation. The lower and upper bounds, A and B, tell us where the accumulation begins and where it ends. The function, f of x, gives the height of each thin strip. And dx represents an infinitesimally small change in x, the width of that strip. So f of x multiplied by dx can be interpreted as one tiny contribution to the area. The integral collects all of these contributions as x moves from A to B. There is one important detail. A definite integral does not always represent ordinary geometric area. Regions above the horizontal axis contribute positively. Regions below the horizontal axis contribute negatively. So if a positive region has area A, and a negative region has the same magnitude, their contributions cancel. Positive A plus negative A is equal to 0. The value of the integral is therefore 0, even though a visible geometric region still exists. This is why we call it signed area. To calculate the total geometric area instead, every contribution must be made positive. One way to do that is to integrate the absolute value of the function. Then both regions contribute positively, giving a total area of 2a. Until now, both limits of integration were fixed. But suppose the upper limit is allowed to move. Define a new function, a of x, as the integral of f of t from a fixed starting point a to the current position, x. As x moves to the right, the accumulated area changes. When the original function is positive, new positive area is added, so a of x increases. When the original function is large, the accumulated area rises quickly. When f of x approaches 0, almost no new area is being added, so a of x begins to flatten. And when f of x becomes negative, the new contributions subtract from the previous total. The accumulation function then begins to decrease. In this way, a of x remembers every earlier contribution.
Now move the upper boundary from x to x plus delta x. This adds one thin region to the accumulated area. Its width is delta x. And when this interval is sufficiently small, its height is approximately f of x. So the change in accumulated area, delta A, is approximately f of x multiplied by delta x. Now divide both sides by delta x. Delta A divided by delta x is approximately equal to f of x. This ratio represents the average rate of change of the accumulated area over that small interval. Now let delta x shrink towards 0. The secant line becomes a tangent line. The approximation becomes exact, and we obtain a remarkable result. The derivative of a of x is equal to f of x. In other words, the derivative with respect to x of the integral from a to x of f of t dt is equal to f of x. This is one form of the fundamental theorem of calculus. Differentiation measures instantaneous change. Integration accumulates infinitely many small changes. And remarkably, these two operations reverse each other. Consider the definite integral of x squared from 0 to 2. Geometrically, this represents the area beneath the parabola y equals x squared over that interval. We could approximate it using rectangles. 4 rectangles give a rough estimate. 8 rectangles give a better estimate. 16 and 32 rectangles move even closer to the exact result. But the fundamental theorem gives us a much faster method. We need to find a function whose derivative is x squared. Since the derivative of x cubed is 3x squared, an antiderivative of x squared is x cubed divided by 3. Now evaluate this antiderivative at the upper and lower limits. At x equals 2, the value is 2 cubed divided by 3, which is 8/3. At x equals 0, the value is 0. Subtracting the lower value from the upper value gives 8/3. So the exact area beneath x squared from 0 to 2 is 8/3. The rectangles reveal what the integral means. The antiderivative allows us to calculate it efficiently. A definite integral produces a number, but an indefinite integral represents an entire family of functions. For example, x cubed divided by 3, x cubed divided by 3 plus 5, and x cubed divided by 3 minus 2 are vertically shifted versions of the same curve. At any fixed value of x, their tangent lines have exactly the same slope. That is because the derivative of a constant is 0. So all of these functions have the same derivative, x squared. When we reverse differentiation, the original constant cannot be recovered. We therefore write that the integral of x squared dx is equal to x cubed divided by 3 plus c. The letter c represents any constant. The same idea of integration appears far beyond geometric area. Suppose v of t represents the velocity of a moving car. During a very short time interval, dt, the car travels approximately v of t multiplied by dt. Adding all of these small distances over time gives the total distance traveled. The units confirm the idea. Meters per second multiplied by seconds gives meters. The same pattern appears in many other situations. A flow rate accumulated over time gives volume. A linear density accumulated over length gives mass. Power accumulated over time gives energy. In every case, we begin with a local quantity, multiply it by a tiny interval, and add all of the contributions. Integration turns local information into a total. So the central idea of integration can be summarized in 5 steps. Divide a continuous problem into small pieces. Measure the contribution of one piece. Add all of the contributions. Let the size of each piece approach 0, and connect the resulting accumulation to differentiation. An integral is not simply an area formula.
It is a precise mathematical language for accumulation. Whenever a total is built from continuously changing pieces, an integral is probably hiding underneath. And once we learn to recognize that structure, many apparently different problems become versions of the same fundamental idea.